So, welcome back to Total War 3 Kingdoms. Now, I wasn't actually planning to do this replay, but it does appear as though the Third Age Reforged patch was not quite as imminent as I was expecting when I announced the end of my .96 coverage. It seems to be dragging its heels a little bit more than I would have wanted, so in order to fill the vast cavernous void that has appeared in my schedule as a result, I'm going to be doing a quick replay from Total War 3 Kingdoms, which actually was a very good game. And I was actually planning to show it at some point regardless of what happened, but I'm going to do it earlier than I thought I was going to. And this again is going to be between some of the people from the RH Discord actually, so it's going to be between myself, Mech Grim, Master Blaster and Outfit, I believe it was, in this particular one. So it's going to be myself and Outfit playing as the green team, or the green and blue team as it were, and we're going to be filling the role of essentially the Kingdom of WEI today, and opposite us we're going to be having a sort of rather strange alliance of SHU and then a sort of ragtag bunch of outlaws and fallen souls from the other kingdoms, we shall call them. But as you can see, one thing that is very prevalent in Total War 3 Kingdoms, I would say, is Vanguard Deployment, because a huge portion of the red team has Vanguard deployed not only in front of us, but also behind us, as you can see over there. And it is one of the things which I'm not quite sure how to feel about, because it does obviously get a lot of aggression into the battle very quickly, but it tends to make deployment a little bit more difficult, because you always know that your opponent is going to be able to basically completely flaunt the rules of the initial deployment zones, but it is rather sporting of the other team actually to come down onto this lower ground, because this map certainly favoured them with the higher ground. I was expecting them actually to deploy over here on this even higher point of ground as well within the trees to make our archers very difficult to use. But we'll go through, I think, my army and my allies' army first of all, because I can talk a little bit more about what I was thinking with regards to my composition. Over here, we can see that my Vanguard state is going to be SHU Yuan, who is probably not one of the more popular Vanguards, purely because his abilities are a little bit different. So you can see that he does have the Flames of the Phoenix, which is the standard AoE that most Vanguards get. Final Rush, which honestly in multiplayer is completely useless, because if the battle is over it allows you to run down troops with a little bit more impunity, it increases the speed, but of course in multiplayer that is never really going to come into effect, so kind of useless to be honest. His unique ability, however, is this, Blazing Saddles, which essentially makes you extremely potent on one charge, but it also it increases your fatigue to max after you use it. So essentially for one charge, SHU Yuan is very, very powerful, but then you sort of sacrifice his longevity a little bit. So all in all, probably not one of the more popular Vanguards, but that ability, if used at the right time, can be absolutely devastating. So we'll see if that is going to be the case in this battle. And as part of his retinue, of course, as a Kingdom of WEI follower, he does have access to the heavy Tiger and Leopard Cavalry, which essentially is on the same tier as the Jade Dragons, the highest tier of main cavalry unit that all factions have access to in the game. Only, I believe they are actually slightly cheaper, and overall in terms of their stats, they're a little bit more durable as well. At least I think that's it. It's certainly the heavy Xiliang Cavalry and the Jade Dragons all sort of occupy that top spot for the heaviest cavalry in the game. And also to fill out the numbers, I've also got some standard Lance Cavalry, which slightly better than the Militia version, more armour, just better stats all around, but certainly not up to the same level as the heavy Tiger and Leopard Cav. Over here, as part of Outfit's retinue, we have Ma Teng, who again is very much a cavalry general. We've already seen him in action before. He's one of those generals which is a bit of a hybrid. You know, you can always tell because a general, they either have abilities of all the same colour, which means they are a full-blooded general of their class. So for example, SHU Yuan has got all red abilities, which, you know, makes him a full Vanguard. But Ma Teng has one ability which is a little bit different, and it's this Unyielding Earth, which essentially makes him sort of a cross between a Vanguard and a Commander. But it's a very useful ability. 100% melee evasion, 100% charge resistance. That will be very, very useful, especially in a wide area. And backing us up, he also has his Qiang Hunters, which the Qiang units, one of the main reasons to play as Ma Teng in campaign or multiplayer is these units, this class of unit, because they are a cavalry unit which is immune to fatigue. And fatigue is so important in this game, and in fact for cavalry in particular, because a unit of cavalry which is sort of on its last legs fatigue-wise is so slow, and it can really take away from their effectiveness an awful lot, but the Qiang Hunters completely circumvent that. Then, the main body of my army, which is going to be faced with a hailstorm of crossbow bolts almost immediately, but fortunately for me, I do have my heavy spear guards right out in front. The heavy spear guards, of course, the heaviest unit of shielded spearmen that most factions can bring, outside of a few unique units, but obviously as the Kingdom of WEI today, we don't have such units available to us, but still, good armour and good shields means that the crossbowmen are going to have a little bit more of a tough time trying to cut through all of them. And then we have my other two generals, I should say. We have Dian Wei, who is going to be my champion today. He also is a bit of a hybrid between champion and commander. He's got a couple of commander abilities, one of which makes him unbreakable, which is very, very nice, of course. The other one is the same as before, Unyielding Earth, melee evasion. And then he has his unique champion ability, Cry of the Forest, which means as soon as he gets down low on health, he gets an enormous buff to his melee damage base and armor piercing, which makes him very dangerous, both in a duel and just in general combat. Because if you get him down to low health, suddenly he becomes a real beast. And yeah, it's definitely not a duelist you want to take lightly, Dian Wei. He's certainly up to the same sort of level as Guan Yu. And then my final general, one of my personal favourites actually, we have Zhu Huang with his massive battle axe. He is a sentinel. Sentinels in general in this game are the best duelists, ironically, just because of their really high melee evasion. And you can see that Zhu Huang, when he's nearby all of his units with all these buffs, he actually gets 105 melee evasion. That will change, of course, because he is going to leave the safety of being around his fellow generals at some point in this battle, but it just goes to show how strong Sentinels can really be. And again, he is another hybrid general because he has his Sentinel ability Fleet-footed, which makes him faster, acceleration, obviously nice charges, but he has a lot of the Vanguard about him as well, so Roar of the Beast for that morale debuff and Flames of the Phoenix for that damage. So while Sentinels are generally thought of as being the best duelists in the game, for Zhu Huang, he is actually a little bit more at home at fighting units, so we'll see how well he can do in this battle. But yeah, definitely a very... I really rate Zhu Huang. I really like him as a general. It's a shame that in campaign you can't really recruit him because the Han Empire suicide him into Yuan Shu's faction almost immediately. I can't wait to mod that out of my campaign so that Zhu Huang and Yue Jin and Tai Shitze can actually be used rather than just dead within the first few turns. Then we have some Archer Militia, so just again, very much a skeleton crew with regards to my archers. I was going very much for a cavalry and infantry focus here, as the Kingdom of Wei armies tend to be more about. So just a full line here of Archer Militia. Just in behind, we have got some Sabre Infantry, which I was debating whether or not to go with something else, but the Sabre Infantry, very solid line infantry unit, basically the bread and butter of your armies unless you're going for the militia option, but I wanted to go for a little bit more strength on the front line in addition to this heavy spear guards I've got in front. It's a very defensive but very, very solid front line that I have. And then back here, just to round off my army at the back, we've got a couple of units of G Militia, which I was expecting to use to have to zone out cavalry, and I would be very right considering the position of enemy cavalry right behind our lines. Then we have my allies' army outfit, so he's got some Protectors of Heaven. Not too uncommon to see these in multiplayer just because of how great they are all round against cavalry, against units. Very, very good, but of course, very, very expensive. Very high tier indeed. You only get access to them when the Three Kingdoms period of the campaign starts. He's also skimped a little bit on his archer line, but that's fine. Archer Militia will still get the job done, and generally speaking, matches are close enough, or quick enough, I should say, that their lower ammunition count overall next to regular archers never really comes into play, to be honest with you. Sabre Militia on the front line, so again, he's actually skimped a little bit more in his front line as well. The Sabre Militia will struggle if they're not supported properly, and he's also gone for some G Militia as well, so his investment has certainly gone elsewhere. I don't have a unit of Yellow Dragons, however, and he does, and Yellow Dragons, of course, extremely deadly in prolonged melee, and also that charge as well, very, very nasty, very good on the attack. Two of his generals, so he's got Cao Cao as a commander, very good commander, Cao Cao is as well. Pretty general buffs that he has actually for a commander. His stats are pretty good, but of course as a commander he's going to be buffing up the units and other generals, going to be very important to do that. And of course when he's on Shadowrunner he's also going to be a little bit more effective. He also has Zhang Liao, who is going to be a sentinel, a full-blooded sentinel as it were. Resolve of the Righteous is his unique ability, so it gives him a bit more of a melee evasion and melee attack rate if he's fighting a stronger enemy. They have sort of made this change to sentinels where they're really overpowering buffs only tend to come into play when they're fighting stronger enemies. Zhao Yun in particular really had his wings clipped with some nerfs for that, but also Zhang Liao suffering a little bit from that as well. But even so, the melee evasion is the main thing which makes Sentinel strong, and Zhang Liao still very much has that, as you can see. Temple Deflection gives him a range block chance as well in a radius, so that should help our units as well. And then Adamant Resolve, a very common Sentinel ability just to buff melee evasion for a short time for himself and nearby units. More Protectors of Heaven, which is probably where most of Outfit's money has gone, to be fair. And then a couple of units of the Heavy Tiger and Leopard Cavalry also. I really like the look of the Heavy Tiger and Leopard Cavalry, to be honest, one of my favourite looking units in the game. But now we'll move on to the red team, and we'll actually start, I think, as I do a bit of a ring around the rosy there, to their ambush cavalry in the rear. Led, of course, the Kingdom of SHU, kind of helming this rebellion against Cao Cao, because we have Zhong Fei, who again is a very, very deadly vanguard. He has got Final Rush as well, which is not too useful. Then he has his two unique abilities as well. Sundering Strike, which is more or less just a more effective, more focused version of Flames of the Phoenix. Lu Bu has got a similar ability to this as well, albeit even more effective. But the main reason you want Zhang Fei is this ability here. Blazing Roar, minus 100 morale. He can send whole wings of an army routing very, very quickly. It's, you know, why you would bring Zhang Fei. Because overall, you know, he's got a decent amount of melee evasion, but like most Vanguards, he does struggle when he gets pinned down in a duel. Then the Cavalry, 2 Jade Dragons, 2 Raider Cavalry, so again a mix of cheap cavalry, and then the very expensive Jade Dragons, of course, very similar in many ways to the heavy Tiger and Leopard Cavalry, but even more expensive, of course. And then over here, we will have a look at the rest of this army. So Sun Ce, who is another very powerful Vanguard, actually, with some hidden axes just in front. So the hidden axe is Zheng Jiang's unique unit. She is also here. Zheng Jiang, we've seen her be very effective in the past. She's actually got some... She's all over the place, really, with regards to her ability. She's got a Sentinel ability here, Tenacity of Steel, which makes her so good in a duel, actually. Of all the champions, other than Shu Chu, because of a few really strange buffs he's got going on as well, she's probably the best duelist. Poison Blade also helps her outside of a duel to really weaken her target beforehand, and then of course Binding Fury, a very common champion ability to deal some damage, more hidden axes. Obviously this is the thing with the outlaw factions, their axe infantry is really very, very strong indeed. Sabre Militia is not going to do the trick for us on the front line, but there's also a lot of Sabre Militia here, some Protectors of Heaven, Archer Militia. Sun Ce himself is again very much a full-blooded Vanguard. Flames of the Phoenix, Blood Fury is the thing which he has going for him, which does make him go berserk, but it also makes him very, very strong indeed. And he's also got Devastating Roar as well, minus 50 morale, so pretty good, but not as devastating as Zhang Fei, but a lot of morale debuffing abilities we're going to have to deal with here. They've also got some Azure Dragons on the front line as well as some Protectors of Heaven. Lots of Peasant Band. Honestly, the Peasant Band will lose to the Sabre Militia as well. So they have got some quality, our enemy, but they have skimped in many places as well, whereas we've got a bit more of a balanced approach. Guan Yu, of course, the very well-known champion, going to be leading the way. Interesting, you'd expect a Vanguard to be there, but Guan Yu himself, of course, has got some very nice abilities, including God of War. We've got Liu Bei as well, a very nice commander, because he has got the Inspiring Words, which essentially is a better version of an ability that commanders already have to buff up their units. Some Mounted Sabre Cavalry, some Yi Archers, which are the unique archers that the Kingdom of Shu get, although their main selling point is actually that they're better in melee, more so than better at range, but that may very well come in handy pretty soon into this battle. But over here we have the final wing of our army, the mercenary infantry over here, as well as a lot of heavy crossbowmen. Heavy crossbowmen, of course, can be really, really devastating. He's gone for a full force of heavy crossbows as well, so a lot of money being spent here. I believe this was by Grimm, potentially. But this was also Sima Yi's wing, so Sima Yi, I think they've actually also saved a bit of money on Sima Yi, because he doesn't look like he's been fully upgraded, but of course strategists want to stay out of the fight as well, so if you're going to save money it will probably be on a strategist. But without further ado, after a bit of a lengthy introduction, let us begin. So immediately, of course, what the enemy are going to do is try to seize the high ground, which they are actually slightly closer to than us, but this is going to turn out to be a big brawl in the trees here. You can see that it is only a 6-minute fight, so actually I think we will turn down to half speed immediately here, because things are going to get going very, very quickly. So you can see the Peasant Band and Guan Yu forming up on the front line. They're going to be backed up by some Protectors of Heaven, so it's not like they're completely absent of quality here on the front line, but you would have to say, in terms of overall units, we're a little bit more prepared for a grindy scrap in the trees here in the middle. But they do have some units of hidden axes on the flank as well, which are going to be a bit of a problem for us. We're going to have to try and use our cavalry to really deal with them. And then, of course, there's the fact that these crossbows are pretty much completely undefended over here. Really, no spearmen at all coming to save them. And also, Sima Yi is also a bit isolated as well. If they had a general over here, it would be a little bit more understandable, but very, very vulnerable. And of course, our cavalry was also hidden in the trees, so perhaps not suspecting that we would take advantage of an ambush from the side. Now they are wide open to Ma Teng and Xiahou Yuan's flanking assault. But now we can see that battle is going to be joined. Guan Yu is right in the middle of all of this, and Guan Yu will not have really any issues whatsoever dealing with Sabre Militia. He may be a champion, but champions are still pretty damn good in a fight as long as the infantry they're facing is not overly powerful. If the roles were reversed and these Protectors of Heaven were chopping away at Guan Yu, it would be a different story, but as it's just Sabre Militia, the God of War is going to be just fine, as Red Hair jumps over 2 men cleanly and deals a devastating blow there. But you can see that there are also these projectiles coming in from the Azure Dragons as well, but of course Sabre Militia are shielded. And actually the Peasant Band are not engaging just yet. The Mounted Sabre Cavalry is coming up the middle, which is actually understandable as well, because we actually only have swordsmen on the front line. So that's going to be pretty devastating as well. But you can see over here that the heavy Tiger and Leopard cavalry seizing the opportunity to try and charge into the hidden axes. But the Protectors of Heaven are right there, so it was a bit of a risky charge, but the heavy Tiger and Leopard cavalry, of course, with a very heavy charge of their own, very much an all-purpose cavalry unit, very tough to bring down. But a charge in there, and actually this is one of the mechanics that is in Three Kingdoms. The best thing to do with a unit like this is to keep them braced, because if they do, they massacre cavalry units. But if you try to countercharge into a unit of charging cavalry, even the strongest anti-cavalry units in the game, like the Protectors of Heaven, will take heavy, heavy losses. And I think this is a bit of the Medieval 2 experience coming out, because there, countercharging is pretty good, but in Three Kingdoms, it will get you killed in a big way. But of course, the heavy Tiger and Leopard cavalry will need to cycle out of there pretty quickly, otherwise they will find themselves on the losing end of that engagement very fast. But now you can see over here, both of my generals, Zhu Huang and Dian Wei, coming in here to deal some damage to heavy crossmen. Sima Yi debuffing them. But it's not going to matter too much because, of course, with the arrival of the heavy Tiger and Leopard cavalry here, the ancient Chinese version of the Rohirrim sweeping down from the hills, led by SHU Yuan. And that's going to be a lot of money down the drain here, because these heavy crossbowmen really don't have anything coming to their aid all that quickly, to be honest. So you can see some mercenary infantry coming forward as I was starting to push forward my own infantry. Of course, this is when Zhang Fei also revealed himself, so that is a problem because we do have a big cavalry force behind us. But if we can finish off these crossbows quickly, we'll be in a good place. So pushing up my infantry to try and crush in from the side and work up the line of our enemy. Zhu Huang starting to rout them. Mercenary infantry will be better suited to this engagement than heavy spear guards, because heavy spear guards, while being a higher tier unit, are ultimately spearmen. Mercenary infantry off a charge will get a decent amount of damage done. But also I have reinforcements on the way. Sabre infantry, which they will be able to match up very nicely against the mercenary infantry, especially if we get a surround off. There's also cavalry charging in from the rear. So I'm just sort of being a little bit more conservative here, seeing the cavalry from our rear, which is actually a bit of a bad thing for my ally outfit here, because he is having to take on the brunt of the enemy forces thus far. Zhang Liao is now here on the front line as well. I love Zhang Liao's style, I have to say. I like the purple, I like the helmet, but he is in close proximity to Guan Yu. Zhang Liao will actually beat Guan Yu in a duel, as long as God of War doesn't hit, but because of that melee evasion, there's a very good chance that God of War won't hit, so it's unsurprising here that Guan Yu is not engaging in a duel, and is instead chewing away on the Sabre Militia, which at this point the Sabre Militia probably not enjoying life all that much. You can see here the banners are pretty, but they do tend to get in the way of the fight somewhat when you really zoom in. Sabre Militia fighting off against the Peasant Band, the ultimate wet noodle contest here in the middle. You can also see here that there's a big force of cavalry going around from the side, so certainly my ally is having to take on the brunt of the forces so far, but it's only a matter of time before our big cavalry force starts to work up the line as well. Heavy Tiger and Leopard cavalry have taken losses, and now they're engaging in melee with both Zheng Jiang and Liu Bei. So you can see here that Zheng Jiang very much at home in melee despite being a champion. Even Liu Bei, to be honest with you, with those two swords, he has a pretty decent array of defensive stats. He's obviously no match for his brothers when it comes to a big old scrap, but he's not half bad for a commander. Most commanders rely almost entirely on their buffs actually to be good in melee, but Liu Bei maybe a little bit less so. Yeah, those heavy Tiger and Leopard cavalry, despite some good initial charges, they are starting to be forced back now, and there is a real strong point to the enemy army over here. The trees are ablaze, but both of our armies are actually in proximity of this, so both of them will be taking the fatigue debuff that fighting in the smoke confers. That's a really good idea. I like that they implemented that. The fact that the smoke causes a drop in fatigue gives you more of an incentive to set the trees alight. You can see over here that this is where things are starting to go wrong a little bit for the red team, as the cavalry force from both myself and Martung, although mostly from myself because Martung's cavalry is mostly ranged. You can see that it was a really devastating charge from SHU Yuan's forces, his cavalry, and also he's being backed up by Zhu Huang and Dian Wei, so some really, really strong combat generals here. I don't have any commanders or strategists. This was very much intended to be an aggressive fight, and you can see now actually that a potential duel getting underway. Zhu Huang and Sun Ce. Although no, I think that was a challenge that I made that was rejected, and very wisely so, because Zhu Huang would really do a lot of damage to a Vanguard in melee. Duel has been rejected by Sun Ce. You can see here that it doesn't really matter. There's no saving this wing of the enemy army at this point. The crossbows have been destroyed. There's only Sun Ce and Sima Yi getting in the way. There is still a bit of a frontline resistance being put up by the army over here though, but the mercenary infantry is pretty isolated and exposed, and they won't be able to chop their way through the heavy spear guards all that quickly. A very, very resilient unit on the front line indeed. They may not get their damage done quickly, against infantry, but they will hold for a long time. You know, you do spend a lot of money on your elite infantry in this game, and in this case it's certainly proving to be worth it. The Sabre infantry also moving forward to try and aid my ally, because I do see which way the wind is blowing on the front line. You can just see, as we zoom out, the sheer amount of red forces they have here, and it's, you know, they're obviously going to win over here because they're taking a lot of damage over here. My cavalry is starting to push forward now as well. But I think actually it's about time we went up to regular speed now that the battle is really being joined. You can see here that the archer militia is horribly exposed, and Zhang Fei's cavalry force starting. So we may have inflicted a lot of losses on their heavy crossbowman, but this is going to be really devastating. It may only be raider cavalry, but it's also only archer militia that they're having to deal with. The yellow dragons rapidly, very rapidly actually, that's a very weird animation they've got going on, charging downhill into the raider cavalry, but of course cycling out is an easy enough matter. And I think Cao Cao, realising what sort of situation he's in, is going to retreat from that fight as Zhang Fei tries to get out of there. As I'm trying to sort of zone out the Jade Dragons with my G Militia, and I did have them brace, but then the Jade Dragons tried to get away, so I did actually chase them off and countercharge them. All of my Archer Militia trying to do their best here, you can see there. Actually, I think we will turn down to slow motion as well. Everything happens so quickly in modern Total War games, it's hard to keep it on regular speed. But you can see there the G Militia are wavering because you saw Zhang Fei's blazing roar come out, which is a real problem because our backlines are now hideously exposed. So while the very start of the battle went well for us because we were able to completely collapse this wing, at this point things looking a little bit more precarious. Sun Ce, however, has been chased off by Dian Wei. Unsurprisingly, between he, Zhu Huang, and Xiahou Yuan, Sun Ce was hopelessly outnumbered in that fight, as well as having, you know, really no support in the way of infantry over here. All the crossbows already crumpled. Xiahou Yuan doing his job there with his cavalry company's devastating charges. I haven't used his Maker of Ways ability yet, his Blazing Saddles. You can see here that it's only a matter of time before these mercenary infantry are also being destroyed as we completely surround them with sabre infantry and spears. So yeah, this is going to be a very nice engagement for us. Meanwhile, a lot of arrows flowing back and forth, but also a very nice charge coming in there from the Jade Dragons right into the heart of this archer force. I don't mind losing my archers, honestly, though, as long as we can really do a lot of damage to the Jade Dragons, because that's a lot of money that they've spent on these units. But also over here on the front line, you can see that Zhang Liao has really been doing a good job at keeping this front line fighting. He's really been the thing keeping everything together on the front line for us, but he is routing at this point, and a lot of that comes down to Zhang Fei's blazing roar in conjunction with the engagements not really going as well as he would have liked. However, taking his place just in time, we've got Zhu Huang coming in here, cleaving through the peasant band with his mighty great axe. Sort of a great axe combined with a halberd in many ways. Very nice weapon indeed. But you can see here as well that while our backlines have been compromised, so too have the enemies. You can see that the charge has pretty much continued from my cavalry, the lance cavalry taking point. You can see here that there are these Azure Dragons, which I'm trying to avoid because of course they are anti-cavalry and melee. Heavy Tiger and Leopard Cavalry now joining the fray, as well as Xiahou Yuan. You can see over here as well there's a bit of engagement as these Sabre Militia also finding themselves fighting my Sabre Infantry, so of course we will win that. And of course with a bit of support from the Qiang Hunters, that fight's only going to go one way. Dian Wei continuing to chase off Sun Ce, because of course the officer's very, very important in this game. You really want to try and make sure that they don't come back, especially one who has a devastating charge like Sun Ce, because his health does not affect how potent his charge bonus is. Liu Bei is here, but here we can see a duel has been joined between Zhu Huang and Guan Yu. I believe these two are actually pretty good friends in real life, despite fighting on opposite sides. Two honourable generals facing off, and Zhu Huang may be a sentinel, but he is a little bit more, you know, designed to fight units than other sentinels, whereas Guan Yu, of course, is a very, very strong champion, so a very evenly matched fight. Zhu Huang has taken a little bit of damage beforehand as well, so we'll see how well that goes. My faith in the sentinels being tested here. You can see here that the Qiang Hunters getting a nice rear charge in, and of course all of the Qiang units have got decent charge as well, pulling out those nice glaives, and they're going to be able to crush that Sabre Militia underfoot. Meanwhile, here we go, the Rohirrim charge continues as the Heavy Tiger and Leopard Cavalry and Xiahou Yuan in his blazing red cape continues to charge. And you can see that already the Sabre Militia really starting to take a lot of damage. The Lance Cavalry has gone on ahead actually to continue the interference that they're running. Hidden Axes will be a good target for a charge. Archer Militia, of course, will be crushed by a charge. You can see here the Protectors of Heaven, one of our units of Protectors of Heaven, fighting surrounded, forming up a bit of a Helm's Deep here, but You know, it is only peasants that they're fighting mostly, although the hidden axes will be able to give a much better accounting of themselves. It's also worth saying as well, they're fighting in the blazing fires as well. So that's going to be a bit of a fatigue problem. And also with Liu Bei nearby, those buffs are going to be pretty nasty for us to have to deal with. You can see here in the back line, still the enemy cavalry, but you know, they have sort of split their cavalry up, the red team, which initially with those charges into the archers went well, but because their cavalry isn't focused like ours on the other side, they're not really able to deal the alpha strikes that we're dealing on the other side. And while they are carving their way through my archer militia is not a very important part of my army, honestly. They were just here to make up the numbers with regards to ranged units, and with Cao Cao also supporting them, the Jade Dragons are sort of being poked and prodded down by all of these arrows. And let's not forget as well that pretty soon my spears are going to be free to engage as well, although, albeit, you know, they will be fairly depleted from their encounter with the mercenary infantry. It did take a little while for the Sabre infantry to get a rear charge into them, but now surely it's only a matter of time before the mercenary infantry crumbles under the pressure. Dian Wei has forced Sun Ce off as well, but Sima Yi has returned. But here we can see Ma Teng and Xiahou Yuan, the cavalry leaders, really doing their thing here. Meanwhile, it's actually quite rare because Zhu Huang and Guan Yu still haven't unhorsed one another as one of them passes through a tree there, sort of trying to find a place where they can fight it out on foot, because he hears still some enemies infantry here in the middle, and it's none other than the Protectors of Heaven. Very, very powerful infantry unit, of course. So the middle is actually more or less going to the red team at this point, just because the Protectors of Heaven are here, and the Sabre Militia, especially with the fires now, their fatigue. It's going to be a problem for them. It's going to be a problem. And also over here, the enemies are also going to win on this flank eventually, but actually over here now you can see that the Protectors of Heaven fighting back to back. The enemy is starting to lose stomach for this fight, so it does go to show just how good a unit of high tier infantry is, but there is also an enemy unit, Protectors of Heaven, in here as well. Fortunately, however, we are starting to really bludgeon our way through the enemy backlines with all of this cavalry action as we go back up to 1 speed. The Lance Cavalry unshielded, but fire arrows, they shoot more slowly. And here we can see the Qiang Hunters continuing to move in, charging into the Azure Dragons. They're wavering at this point. They may be an anti-cavalry unit, but they're still not immune to morale shocks. The Yi Archers also being hounded by Xiahou Yuan. And that's really what we're hoping for at this point. Our cav superiority in the backlines to carry us to victory, as well as all the infantry, because my infantry was of higher quality, but it's been tied up by those mercenary axemen for a bit too long for our liking. Still Zhu Huang and Guan Yu unable to unhorse one another. As I said, those two were good friends in real life, so that's not really the sort of banter they would be having with one another. Zhang Liao has returned, albeit very, very depleted. Zhang Fei, on the other hand, they may have the same name, but they're not related. Zhang Fei has dismounted, and he is carving his way through these Qiang Hunters, and already doing his thing and causing morale shocks. That's really what the best thing that Zhang Fei has at his disposal. You can see here still my heavy Tiger and Leopard cavalry. We're taking damage, but ultimately they're good armour and shields, saving them from the vast majority of the fury that the enemy archers can impose on it. Meanwhile, bit of a clash of the titans up here as well. This isn't a duel, this is just them engaging one another, sort of circling each other. Two champions with dual weapons, Dian Wei and Zheng Jiang. But as I'm sure you can see, very, very quickly this duel took a bit of an ugly turn. And this is the power of the God of War ability. It managed to land on Zhu Huang, and now he's fighting a very uphill battle. But still, these two mighty warriors clashing. And actually, he did manage to get that to land, the Flames of the Phoenix, but he's got a long way to go if he's going to come back in this fight, so I may very well lose one of my generals here. And also, we're starting to see these morale effects coming in, but we were able to kill off the mercenary infantry, so my heavy spearmen and my sabre infantry on the way over. So we're now going to really try to be able to work up the line. Zhu Huang has been defeated, unfortunately for us. Victory at any cost. And he dies. So here we can see the Protectors of Heaven trying to sort of hold back the tide, as it were, as my infantry comes clashing into the side of them. The enemy cavalry has just not been able to deliver the alpha strikes that they really needed to in the back lines, which is why ultimately we're still looking at a good place. Despite losing Zhu Huang, the enemy have lost Sun Ce, and now Dian Wei is going to be riding with the Heavy Tiger and Leopard Cavalry. They really fought one another very evenly there, Zheng Jiang and Dian Wei, but I don't really have the luxury of throwing one of my generals under the bus. And now you can see the Azure Dragons, Heavy Tiger and Leopard Cavalry riding with Dian Wei and Zhang Liao now. Meanwhile, Xiahou Yuan is sort of chasing off units. He's a little bit further away than I would like. But the enemy backlines are pretty exposed at this point, and with all of my infantry arriving on the scene. So yeah, that match ended rather strangely. You know, there was a bit of a weird end to that, to be honest. But ultimately, you know, the battle was over. You know, the morale shocks were setting in. The enemy was starting to run. You know, Guan Yu had actually perished as well. Zhang Fei was also routing. So really, the only general they had left was Zheng Jiang, and she had very, very low health indeed. So it was only a matter of time anyway. And yeah, the morale shock set in, and victory was ours, and mostly that came down to just being able to consolidate, really crush through that cavalry. Also, the enemy lost a lot of their heavy crossbows early on. Heavy crossbows are pretty expensive as well. They're very effective, but they're very expensive. You've got to defend them better than that. And Xiahou Yuan, Ma Teng, and all that accompanying cavalry was just able to crush through them. And on the other side, Zhang Fei was not able to do the same with his companies of cavalry, because I feel like they split up rather than really go for the alpha strike and keep their cavalry charging into individual sections of the line. They just didn't end up doing that, which was ultimately the difference between us, because Guan Yu killed Zhu Huang. You know, the enemy may have lost Sun Ce, but they would have been in a better position, I think, had they have handled that differently. But nonetheless, this is going to be you know, the thing which fills the gap, essentially. I'm really hoping that .97 comes out soon, because, you know, this essentially was a completely free week for me, and I was really looking forward to really hammering out some replays, and unfortunately that hasn't really come to pass, which makes me sad. I really, really hope that .97 comes out soon, and I wasn't really sold down the river with regards to how soon I was told .97 was coming out, but hey, by the time this is posted up, maybe it will be out, and I will be complaining about nothing. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this. Bit of a weird end, actually. I don't know whether the updates have sort of caused... because that battle did sort of go in the way it was, so it can't have corrupted the replay in any way, but it ended with a crash, which was kind of weird. Nonetheless, hope you enjoyed this. Bit of a Three Kingdoms replay just to tide everyone over, and I hope you'll join with whatever is next, which again, I really hope is going to be a .97 replay, a debut for .97.